Hello, BookTube. As you will know, some of you anyway will know, I am one of the hosts of a brand new BookTube event that starts in June, and that is June on the Range. It's Michael K. Vaughan's event, and he's drafted a number of booktubers as co-hosts, and it is designed, as you might guess from the title, to celebrate westerns. Once the king of the book world, but now completely dethroned, and I doubt ever coming back in their traditional form. Uh, and there aren't any real hard and fast prompts, no form to June on the Range, just read some westerns. Uh, but I decided to devote the first week of June on the Range to the name, the author who is more than any other synonymous with westerns, and that is Louis L'Amour. Uh, and I've been reading a ton of Louis L'Amour. It doesn't take much to do that. It's not only is he a very easy author to read, but his books aren't long. So if you have a gigantic amount of reading sort of slotted into your day as it is, it's not hard to get a lot of Louis L'Amour done. Uh, and I want to talk about the first. I want to do my first Louis L'Amour video for June on the Range 2022. But first, I want to address an email that I got from one of you. Now, I want to preface this by saying the email was not hostile. We have a wonderful, wonderful community in this little corner of BookTube. I know that's a trite cliche, and a lot of the booktubers who have 60,000 subscribers or more who talk about community are not part of any community except the friends they had coming in. They don't want to make any friends on BookTube, and they rather hate their subscribers. But in this little corner of BookTube, it actually means something. I found it to be far more true than not true. So we can joke with each other. We can disagree with each other. Oh, here's our little time clock. Here's our little time clock. That is daytime. This Stevestream is going on for an hour. So when that light is gone, I'm gone as well. But with plenty of time still. And I want to address this because I have a feeling that the person who sent this email will watch this video. They might not watch it live, but they'll watch this video. Somebody sent me an email totally relying on the reality of what I just described, that this is a genuine community of friends who can joke with each other, disagree with each other, still stay civil, still have each other's backs. I've waited a long time to find a large reading community that was like that. I can't believe that it exists online, of all places, the very last place I would expect, the very last one that I would expect to find such a community. But I have, and the email that I received that I want to talk about just briefly before I talk about Louis L'Amour was offered in the spirit of that community. And this person said, I like your channel. I like Michael K. Vaughan's channel. I like all of the YouTubers who are involved in June on the Range. But I have to wonder at the advisability of going ahead with this event when America is currently being racked with mass shootings. There have been 20 in the last 2 weeks. And some of them have been epic in size, just grotesque in their violence. And the marquee one of all took place in Uvalde, Texas. Texas being, of course, the #1 location for any Western novel. And most Western novels celebrating gunfire, guns. Guns are inextricable from Westerns. You can take a lot out of a Western, a lot. You can take Native Americans out of a Western. You can take the time period out. You can put them in the present day. You can take cows and cowboys out of a Western, but you can't take guns out. And the person who sent that email wanted to know that they were aware that they may be overreacting. And in fairness, I want to say I think that is an overreaction. It's totally understandable. If you have a soul and you're watching the news in America about gunfire, that soul is in deep pain. But even the person who sent that email to me, which just had me thinking, I wanted to address it here before I move on. Even the person who sent that email was willing to acknowledge that maybe they were acting out of that kind of pain and not thinking clearly, and B, willing to admit that they might be wrong. In this case, with all the love in the world, that is wrong. These books, of course, were written decades before any kind of tragedy in America, and they aren't advocacy tracks. If you want to find literature that makes, first of all, literature is not sending most of the people who are doing these crimes out to do those crimes. But the ones who are being sent out by literature are not being sent out by Louis L'Amour. I guarantee you they are. They are being sent out by Westerns. Uh, it's not obviously meant as a celebration of guns, gun culture, gun fire, gun violence, that all of us would come together for June on the Range to celebrate these books. We have a discrete list of hosts at June on the Range. If you go to my announcement video or Michael K. Vaughan's announcement video, you see the whole list of them. And I'd be willing to bet on that list that only a small number of those hosts have even held a gun in their hand in their life. Some might be far more familiar with guns than others, but that's not what this is. I think the sender of that email knows that's not what this is. I just wanted to get that out of the way first before I start to talk about this sort of stuff, because it's saturated with guns. Uh, I'll let you just two more points. One is going to sound very American, but it's nevertheless indisputably true. Most gun owners are extremely responsible gun owners. Most of them take it very seriously. Regardless of where they stand on federal legislation, they take it very seriously. Most of them. And by that, I mean an overwhelming percentage. It's not like it's hovering around 50%. It's a huge amount. On both sides of the political aisle, all across the social spectrum. That's one thing. That's a very American thing to say. That does not in any way even look towards excusing the weird epidemic we've got going on in this country. But it is nevertheless true. And the second thing I want to say is that the characters in these novels, most of which are set between 1860 and 1890, would have been the men in these novels using their guns to solve problems or start problems would have been horrified. The characters in the books would have been horrified at the kinds of guns that we're talking about in 2022. Just plain horrified. So, and you can see that in the novels, in the horror and contempt they feel for things like the Gatling gun. So I don't want to dwell too much on this. I want to point out, especially if the person who sent that email is watching. I sent a response email, of course, privately, but it's been on my mind. I wanted you to know that. I wanted you to know that I am thinking about this, and I don't think you can touch June on the Range with the news cycle America is currently going through. I don't think they touch at any point. They certainly don't touch with your hosts. Your hosts are delightful. Maybe not me, but all the rest of them are delightful. So that's out of the way. I want to talk about Louis L'Amour. I want to spend a week. I've spent the week, really. I haven't been making the videos on it, but I've been making other videos. But I've spent the week reading Louis L'Amour. A lot. I've read a lot of Louis L'Amour in my life. He's written hundreds of books. And they have been in print in one way or another for a long time, decades and decades and decades, all the second half of the 20th century. And so far, I think a great deal of Louis L'Amour is still in print. So I've read a lot of these books before, and I'm trying to pick and choose. I have, I think, pretty much everything that he ever wrote on ebook. I used to have a whole couple of shelves, double stacked, of mass market paperbacks of Louis L'Amour, and loved going back to them. But after a while, I thought, you're not going back to them fast enough. Probably they should go. So they're gone. I don't have any Louis L'Amour in paperback or hardcover now. I don't have the lovely leather-bound editions that Mark Richardson has. A lot of other collectors have very special editions, first edition hardcovers, that sort of thing. I don't have any of that. I have Louis L'Amour. He exists at Hyde Cottage only in electronic form. But I've been thinking about him while I've been reading his books, because I made a contention. Was it yesterday? The day before? I think it was my first June on the Range video. I made a contention. I was talking about somebody else, but I made a contention about Louis L'Amour that one of the reasons why he dominates the field, it isn't prolixity. You might at first think that it would be, but it's not. It's not prolixity. Most Western writers wrote more novels than he did. It's not that. But I think it was yesterday, I said, well, maybe one of the reasons why he dominates the genre is that he's a natural storyteller. And that's a very woolly phrase. It's a very shop-worn idea. Just because it's shop-worn doesn't mean it's wrong. I think it is right. I think such things do exist. I worry about the phrase because I've heard it used about Stephen King. Which immediately when it's used about King, I automatically start to revert away from natural storytelling ability and towards technical ability, which he conspicuously lacks. I don't know one way or another. Well, we'll get to King in due time. But for Louis L'Amour, when I think about it, when I think about that natural storyteller bit, I naturally wonder about other writers in American history, like if we confine ourselves to American history, who I would also call natural storytellers, going all the way back to the very first one in American literary history, which is Washington Irving. And when I thought about that list, I thought, well, okay, if that's true, then what are the characteristics? Is there a way that I could definitively prove that Louis L'Amour is a natural storyteller? And one of the ways I think that you can do this, I know this is a tangent to a much larger conversation. I'll try to keep it tethered to Westerns. One of the ways that I think you can tell a natural storyteller is that in a very real way, and this is not meant as a criticism, their work will not change over time. Now that sounds horrible, but if you're a natural storyteller, you're going to know what you're doing right away. It's not going to have anything to do with your venue. It's not going to have anything to do with your publisher's editing team. It's not going to have anything to do with any of that. Think about Robert Louis Stevenson, a quintessential natural storyteller. If you look at his work, it doesn't change over time, not in its essences, not in its narrative essences. It stays the same from the very first thing he wrote when he was a kid until the last thing he wrote that was literally pried from his dead hands. If I'm right about Louis L'Amour, if that claim about Louis L'Amour is right, then that will probably be the case. His work will probably not change over time. And the way for me to figure that out is not to rely on decades old memory of reading Louis L'Amour. The way to figure that out is to conduct depth charge experiments. So that's what I'm going to do for the remainder of the first week of June on the Range. I'm going to drop depth charges at different periods in his career. I'm not going to try and read the whole of this guy. Not at all. But I'm going to try and figure out if his art changes over time. So the first one that I chose was a novel from 1954. Louis L'Amour, he wrote during the Great Depression. In fact, the first time he ever got paid for writing was during the Great Depression. Ironically enough, for an author who so much celebrates the noble independence of his lone gunman on the range, who want nothing from nobody. The very first time that he got paid, I think he was paid by the U.S. government. I think he wrote a WPA guide. I think that was the first money that he got, the first real money that he got from writing anything. But then, like so many people, he stopped writing during World War II so he could go out and fight the Germans. And it wasn't until he came back that he started writing again. Started seriously submitting stories. He got back from the war and was at sixes and sevens. The only thing that he ever liked to do was write. The only thing that anyone ever paid him to do was write. The only thing that ever felt good to be paid to do was write. So when he got back, he started again. And in the 1950s, he started writing novels. It was much easier. The thing that's going to seem self-evident if you want to make a career at writing, but that wasn't true when he was doing it. That hasn't mostly been true in history. When he got back from the war and demobilized and settled back in civilian life and thought, okay, well, I have to make a living, there was a vibrant magazine culture. You wouldn't recognize what it was like from the way it is now. It was incredibly vibrant, and there were lots and lots of magazines, all kinds of different editors, always hungry for content and with a massive readership. Numbers that the best magazines in the world, the most successful ones in the world today, would kill to have a fraction of the readership of tiny little magazines you've never even heard of. That environment was all around Louis L'Amour and also everybody else, male and female. It was around everybody. And it was an awful tempting thing to just relax on that world and not try the work of a novel. That world would pay the bills. Usually, it would pay the bills. It had no long-term future. Anyone who was in it could tell you that, but writers aren't always concerned with long-term futures. Anyway, it was only in the 1950s that Louis L'Amour really started writing novels, and partly he went with Westerns because the market was bottomless for it. Maybe he also had a gift for it. It's easy to imagine a weird alternate universe in which he wrote other things, in which he graduated, let's say, for instance, from writing sports-related short stories, baseball, boxing, horse racing, something like that, to writing serious work. Plenty of his contemporaries did exactly that. From him writing, by serious, I mean serious literary fiction. He didn't do that. Instead, he started writing Western novels, and he started finding relationships with editors, and that started working. And he was a hard worker, got into a regular routine of generating pages every day, as you really must. And I wanted to begin my examination. I want to pick a novel from the 1950s, and fairly early on in his career. The one that I picked. Here, let me detach it from the iPad. The one that I picked is this one, uh, Crossfire Trail, which came out in the early 1950s. He wrote this novel. This was before he had written even 10 novels. I think this was very early in his career. 1954 would have been the third or fourth year of his career as a writer of novels. So I picked this one to start off with. I figure I'll chart. Oh goodness, there's a tag. Oh, there's a ton of people in the chat. I wasn't even thinking. I was just making this as a YouTube video. Monet Doyle says Sarah of the Bookish Knitter talked about June on the Range. Yes, Sarah made a video today, and in classic Sarah fashion, just decided. Well, I love June on the Range because I love cowboy romances. So now we have that cover. That patch of the field is covered. I was going to talk about some cowboy romances. She's going to read all cowboy romances for June on the Range. Fantastic, absolutely fantastic. Trish Bovell, who sent me a very nice gift today. I will do well enough to read Lonesome Dove. I will get to Louis L'Amour next June. Lonesome Dove is big. You're not going to have any problem getting through it. Tony Miller says, hi from England. I've recently started reading Westerns, and the first two I read were by Louis L'Amour. I'm currently reading The Drift Fence by Zane Grey, which I'm really enjoying. Okay, but you didn't tell me the two Louis L'Amours. You just drop that there. I'm doing a video about Louis L'Amour, for Pete's sake. Which two did you read? Andrew Russell says, hi, Steve. Just to let you know, another of your recommendations has landed with me, namely In by Will McPhail. Oh, well, I love hearing that my recommendations have landed, and B, the more people who read that book, the happier I am about it. I didn't get anywhere near the talk or distribution or word of mouth that I wanted it to get. Nowhere near. Even for me, it was an uphill battle to convince people that a graphic novel would be worth their serious attention. It's just a persistent prejudice. It sticks true, even though the top 10 items in the shape of books, the top 10 at least in the Eastern and Western world, are graphic novels. They are not just prose on the page, but it doesn't matter. It was an uphill battle. There's no way that I could do it. I'm glad that it worked for you. Jasper Ton Antonelli says hello. Matt Sheridan says good evening, peeps, and hi, Steve. You got the order reversed there, pardon. Long string of eyes. It's barcode. Blood Meridian didn't make the count. No, Blood Meridian did not make the count. It stinks. Let's see here. Monet Doyle says, I ordered some cowboy romance books that Sarah mentioned. Okay, but again, as with previous comments, which ones did you order? Which ones? The old Harlequin historical, The Last Rancher, certainly sounded good, didn't it? And I second what Sarah says, that I cannot recommend Maisie Yates, or especially for me, B.J. Daniels, high enough. You won't go wrong with a B.J. Daniels novel. Jasper says, me and my mom are reading Lonesome Dove this month. Also, I'm currently reading God, a biography by Jack Miles, and it is a great reading experience, even though I disagree with most of what he says. Well, it is a great reading experience. Lots and lots of fun. Jenny Park says, my only experience with Westerns is the Magnificent Seven movie remake. I wouldn't even know where to start with books. Start with a Louis L'Amour. They're not in, except for the Sackett books, they're not really in any kind of sequence. Just pick one. Matt Sheridan says, your first recommendation I went by was Patriots by A.J. Languth, and I'm glad I did. Simply amazing book. Well, this is wonderful. I love hearing that my recommendations have landed, because it's the only thing that matters to me. It matters to me more than anything else. I am at heart a book recommender, whether I'm writing a review, talking to you at an information desk at a bookstore, or this channel. So that's great. Mayberry Book Club is here. Last month, I picked up a beautiful edition of Collected Stories of Louis L'Amour at the local Goodwill. How many volumes are in his collected stories? I think it's 4. Is it 4? Oh, okay. Monet says you ordered an Unbroken Cowboy, and I Love This Bar. Yes, Sarah said that I Love This Bar is one of her favorite Toby Keith songs. But she also mentioned Montgomery Gentry, and the song that she mentioned by them is fantastic. So that makes up for it. Freeman says, reading The Man Called Noon by Louis L'Amour. Jubal is my favorite Louis novel. Have you read them all? Or lots of them? Andrew Russell wants to know, have you done a Western starter kit? I did a kind of thing. There's a video where I list 10 Westerns that are my favorites, but I think it would work as a starter kit. I think they're also the best 10 Westerns that have ever been written. Uh, Tony says, my Louis L'Amour books were The Riders of Lost Creek and A Man Called Trent. Let's see here. The person with the barcode says, what's the greatest series of graphic novels ever created, and why is it Eiichiro Oda's magnum opus One Piece? No idea what those are. Never read one. Jenny Park says, will you write a Western someday? I doubt it. I doubt it very much. Actively Read says, your book recommendations have been home runs for me thus far. Love The Doctor's Blackwell. Going to try Lonesome Dove for the first time. Oh, wonderful. You will love Lonesome Dove. But anyway, I want to get back to, I don't know what to do with having an active chat when I'm trying to make a video. Maybe I should just make a video and just let the chat be the chat. I don't know. But I want to talk a little about the Crossfire Trail. Since this is the Louis L'Amour that I'm reading this time around, I guess I can just keep looking back at the chat. But this is a Western that starts on the water. It starts in San Francisco Bay. A ship is moored in San Francisco Bay, and a man named Rodney is dying. And he enlists the aid of a man named Rafe Karadec. He extracts a promise from Rafe. Take these papers, these deeds, these rights of ownership to my cattle ranch in Wyoming and protect it from predatory ranchers elsewhere. And you can split the profits of the ranch with my wife or my daughter, Anna. That'll be the inducement for you to do it. Rafe, he gives his word anyway, without an inducement. He doesn't plan on taking any money, and agrees. And Rodney gets his agreement just before Rodney dies. Now, Rodney is dying because he was beaten to death. Because when the ship moored in San Francisco Harbor, he went to their brutal captain, who had impressed both of them. He had shanghaied both him and Rafe. They did not voluntarily join this crew at all. He went to the captain, a gigantic brute of a man, and said, and begged again, can I go ashore? I insist. I have to take care of my business arrangements now that we're back in the United States. And the captain beat him so severely, while a first mate held a gun on everyone else so they couldn't help him, that he eventually dies of his injuries. But not before he extracts that promise from Rafe Karadec, who has only one thing to do on board before he has been planning for this. He has a boat ready to take him to shore. He has only one thing to do before then, and that is to beat that tall, brutish captain within an inch of his life, to repay him for the beating that he gave to Rodney, but maybe not fatally. So he does that, and then he leaves, and it promptly ends up in Wyoming, at the ranch of Mr. Rodney, whose predictions were right. The ranch is, in fact, being taken over by hostile ranchers all around it. Rafe rides into the situation, immediately falls for Anna, Rodney's daughter, and comes up with a way through sheer physical strength. He is a physically unbeatable main character. Another one of those. There are many in the Louis L'Amour novels. But he's also smart and tactical, and he comes up with a way to save the property. And it takes a lot. There's a lot of traveling involved, and during a lot of the book, we get flashbacks to his life at sea. Louis L'Amour knew his way around a boat and knew his way around the ocean, and it comes up in a lot of his books. But and it comes up here when you would least suspect it, because this is in other ways a very stereotypical Western thing. And I won't spoil the ending. I don't know if I should worry about spoiling the ending of Louis L'Amour novels, except he keeps finding new readers. So maybe I do have to worry about spoiling the ending. But let's just say the large elements of the ending are exactly what you would expect from a Western. And it was remarkably good. Crossfire Trail is remarkably good. It's remarkably textured. It's very much an adventure novel. It very much wants to keep going. It doesn't ruminate much, but it does ruminate some, and the rumination's not dumb. It's not, my horse sure is pretty. It isn't anything like that you would expect the ruminations in a normal Western. It works really well. Now, it isn't the first Louis L'Amour that I read for June on the Range. The first one that I read days and days ago was The Proving Trail. I think The Proving Trail was written a long time after Crossfire Trail, and if I'm right, I'm not going to hold it. I only came up with this chronological depth charging a few days ago, so I'm not going to count The Proving Trail. I'm going to move forward from here to the late 1950s, early 1960s. That's going to be the next book I read by Louis L'Amour tonight. I'll pick one. But when I think back on this reread, I think I'd reread The Proving Trail once before. So the thing I did a few days ago was a reread. It reads differently. I'm not saying that it's not just as good, just as entertaining as a story, uh, but it reads differently, very differently. And again, in addition to all of this, I also have to figure out the conditions of each of these novels. It wouldn't be fair for me to sound a depth charge on a novel that Louis L'Amour cobbled together from an old short story at night really fast to make a deadline over something that he maybe thought of a little bit more. I'll, I'll be I'll be creating a sort of sonar map of what I make of this author because aside from you know quick palate cleansers or a little bit of enjoyment here and there, I don't think I'll revisit Louis L'Amour until next June, until the next June on the Range. Oh my God, the chat. Oh my God, the chat's just going free. A gagging for lit wants to know where is Frida. She is right next to me. She is always right next to me. If you can't see her, she's still there. Uh, let's see here. Jasper John Antonelli responding to Rena's reading says that Death Note is so good. Death Note is one of only two manga series that I have read. The other one being Crying Freeman, which is so old. It was at the very beginning of manga making its way into America. Jill Garcia says, hi, Steve. Hello. Tony Miller says, I've added quite a few of your top 10 Westerns to my TBR, the ones available as ebooks. Let me know if you want me to send you something as an ebook. RTL LTR says, wonder if Louis, being incredibly well-read, played a big part in his success. His Education of a Wandering Man is a great intro to him and his love of reading that started very early. Yeah. Education of a Wandering Man is a terrific, terrific autobiography. But him being well-read, I don't think it had anything to do. There's precious little reflection of that in his books. It would only be. I think it would only be a tenuous connection. It would be that his being well read increased his desire to make a mark on literature himself. A lot of well read people feel that way. They feel like I owe so much. I need to give something back. And boy, did he? Right? His name is immortal. Gagging for Lit says, have you read any Simon Webb westerns? He has a YouTube channel called History Debunked, where he talks obsessively about race and immigration. Simon Webb is alive. He has novels, Western novels, but also has a YouTube channel. No, I've never read this person at all. No. Jenny Park says, what's the difference between manga and graphic novels? Manga is a type of graphic novel. Anything that's image driven is a graphic novel if it's in book form, but manga is one type of that. So manga is not a superhero comic. It's not a Western comic. It's not a romance comic. It's its own kind of thing. J. Scott Phillips says, howdy, Steve. Would The Curse of Capistrano, the first Zorro novel, count for June on the Range? Sure it would. Sure it would. Although we have to figure out what counts for June on the Range. I was going to do a massive attempt at a taxonomy of what a Western is. Today, I was gearing up towards it in my mind, and then Sarah of the Bookish Knitter struck out of nowhere with a whole list. Half of the books that she talked about are contemporary romance westerns, which she loves, and she was a large part of me going to them and loving them all over again. But they would blow apart most of the criteria that I would have. I would have said post-American Civil War to the death of Queen Victoria, just long enough to include the shootist. And that one of the elements involved should probably be that either the protagonist or some of the other characters are veterans of the Civil War on one side or another. And that the novel should be set against the backdrop of genocidal warfare against American Indians, or it should involve that warfare directly. None of those things work in a contemporary Western, and yet I can't say they're not Westerns. So I need to figure out. I very much want to do that kind of categorical, all-embracing taxonomy of the Western and what it is. Let's see here. Gagging for manga is Japanese style. Graphic novels don't have to be Japanese. Danielle, Bluegrass reader, says, I love The Education of a Wandering Man. Yeah, it's a real classic. I'm going to leave it out for June on the Range. I'm obviously not going to do it because I'm going to concentrate squarely on fiction for June on the Range. But I loved it too. And reading Louis L'Amour, reading Crossfire Trail, for instance, made me want to go back to that book. Jasper says, speaking of manga, Hirohiko Araki's JoJo's Bizarre Adventures, Steel Ball Run, is about a cross-country race horse set in the 1890s. Well, your comment's gone because you wrote the first chapter of the book that you. Nathan Fong says, "Do you think it matters if the author has actually ever been to the West in terms of quality or authenticity of their prose?" Well, authenticity often takes a ding if they don't know what they're talking about, and is often mocked in Western novels, where characters who do know the West, who are in the West, will constantly sneer at the writer fellers back east who don't have any idea what they're talking about and write dime store novels that sell really well. So it's a kind of a gimmick within Western novels. Gagging for Lit says, I read the Hannibal series by Thomas Harris recently. Have you read any of those? You asked a have you read question. And not just a have you read question, but a have you read question about one of the most popular authors of the late 20th century. How have I offended that I got a have you ever read a Thomas Harris novel question? How have I offended that I got such a thing? Yes, I have read the Animal series by Thomas Harris. You can assume such things with me. You really can. I have read them. I very, very much like them. Jill Garcia says, have you read any? Another have you read question. It's John and Hank Green. It's John and Hank Green, the most famous YouTubers of them all, the architects of YouTube. And you want to know if I've read their books. Let's move on and hope that the have you read questions don't continue. J. Scott Phillips will save me. He will not ask me a have you read question. I think we can safely set the era for the Western as from the beginning of the California Gold Rush to the death of Gwen Stacy. All right. Well, he didn't ask me a have you read question, but he's still a troublemaker. Jordan Parsons, please don't yell at me too much, but I'm passionately convinced Cormac McCarthy is a great Western novelist. Yell at you, Pookie. I wouldn't do that. You're dead wrong. You are dead wrong. And the reason you're wrong is because in this one instance, you don't know what you're talking about. You have not read the thing. You have not read the kingdom over which you are so unhesitatingly willing to crown him. And that drives me nuts, whether it's Western novels or Japanese fiction or German fiction or World War II fiction. If you don't know the kingdom, you don't get to crown the ruler. Anyway, I know Nick Piccarilli says, "Oh no, back to have you read questions." I don't know where they came from. They you have chosen death. I'm not going to get angry, but my Deb could tell you it is a bad way to start. Don't ask me, have you read, when all I do is read 150 pages an hour for an average of 10 hours every day for longer than your parents have been alive. That adds up to a lot of reading. Anyway, uh, uh, Gagging for It says, okay, just because I liked them, but I hated the end of the third one and gave up on the fourth one. Okay, well, the end of Hannibal is a travesty. I've mentioned it many times on this channel. It is a foremost example of an author simply betraying his readers who cared, who are invested in the story. But Hannibal Rising, I gotta give it its due. It is spotty, and it is clearly, one cousin removed from the screenplay that it started as. But it has wonderful bits in it. If you go back, you'll find them. There are some wonderful moments in that. The difference being that in most of the other books, the whole of it is wonderful. It's not just wonderful moments. The chat is going like crazy here. Jenny Park says, haha, I just assume now that Steve has read everything. I haven't read everything. This one piece that came out I have not read, but Thomas Harris, for God's sake. Anyway, Jasper writes another huge paragraph. I won't have time to read it. Steel Ball Run is a Western manga set in a horse race from San Diego to New York City. The main character are a crippled jockey, Indian, and freed slave, and an Italian. Well, okay, if I'm going to read manga, I will need to get extensive recommendations from you and James Holder and a whole bunch of other people. Chaz Gross says, Steve, have you heard about the folk duo Jamestown Revival making music based on the first 6 stories of the collected story? No, I have not heard. Someone's writing music about Louis L'Amour. Wilson Shugard is here. Happy Platinum Jubilee. Yes. It has been universally acknowledged by people in my email, in my inbox, that the best way that I can observe the Platinum Jubilee is with a Windsor starter kit. which I'm amazed to learn I've never done. So I think that goes without saying that should happen this weekend. Uh, Matt Sheridan says asking Steve if he's ever read something's like asking a Catholic priest if they believe in good or evil. Chaz Gross says the CD is called Fireside Chat with LL. How charming. A Gagging for Lit says, yes, I liked a lot of the moments, but the dialogue by page 200 got to be disgustingly bad. Yes. Yes. The dialogue, especially, it's a huge weak spot in the book. But there are some wonderful moments. I don't claim any more for young Hannibal. And I think that the novel Hannibal is not just the best thing that Thomas Harris ever wrote, but a fantastic bit of literature until the absolute stab to the back betrayal of the reader in the very end of the book. You know exactly what I'm talking about. Unbelievable that it happens. I'm still stunned by the fact that it happens. But the rest of the book, oh my God, there's casual, unbelievable eloquence on every page. Anyway, J. Scott Phillips, would Stephen King's Dark Tower series count as westerns? Really bad ones? Yeah. Why would you want to read something that's really bad? They are not clearly an homage. They are clearly an homage, but technically not set in the American West. Well, does a western have to be set in the American West? Does it? Or I don't know. I will work out a taxonomy of the America, but I think Dark Tower series. I think pretty much anyone would include them. They shouldn't. That's reading time you're never going to get back. But, a whole bunch of lines, a barcode, I guess. One Piece has over 490 million copies in circulation in 58 countries and regions worldwide. I'm not going to have time to read the. What is it about manga that's making people write whole paragraphs of prose? Grandma Joe says, "Hey Steve, not Western related. Regarding reading Vanity Fair, after your top 5 English novels, oh my, Becky Sharp, brilliant novel. Vanity Fair is incredible. The thing that I often want to caution people about is that there's a lot more to it than Becky Sharp. I mean, she is the absolute quintessential English novel scene stealer. But the book is about a lot more than that. But yeah, absolutely. Jasper says, I can't help but be verbose, but that isn't true. You can't. uh, Barcode says space westerns. Exactly. So I'm not sure that an American location is necessary. Isaiah Armstrong says, could you read Stephen King for Garb August? I could, but I'm not going to, because that would antagonize a lot of people on BookTube who sincerely love Stephen King and whose reading lives have really benefited from that love. So I would no more pick him than I would pick J.K. Rowling. I would not pick authors that I know people sincerely love under the rubric of garbage, especially since, as I've said with Westerns, we first need to develop a foolproof taxonomy for what we mean when we say garbage. I would say that on every critical level, Stephen King is garbage. He's never written a good book. All of his books are demonstrably bad, and in a lot of easily mapped out demonstrable ways. To me, that means garbage. But he sold 800 million copies. He shaped the reading taste of 2 whole generations. The kind of thing that we automatically think of as garbage doesn't do that, doesn't come close to doing that. So there are other elements involved. If I can ever get my Garb August host to commit to a live conversation, we can hash all this out in front of you. Let's see here. Matt Sheridan says, I was thinking about reading Salem's Lot this summer. Not a bad choice. There's a new movie of Salem's Lot coming out, right? It's one of the only Stephen King novels that isn't a bad choice. He wrote it. He was edited, which is why there is inevitably a much longer version that he released when he thought he was, above all that. Oh, goodness gracious, there's 60 people here. Jill Garcia says, any read-alongs coming up? Well, yeah, there's June on the Range, which is happening right now. There's Garb August in August. And in July, there's Jane Austen July. Might be possible that there's a read-along coming up for Jane Austen July. Let's see here. Monet Doyle says, some booktubers are talking about beach reads. Are you going to do a beach reads recommendation? I've done whole columns on beach reads. And again, tried to figure out what they are and what they mean. They're largely based on a totally anachronistic idea. The idea that the whole world buttons up and goes on vacation from June until September. That doesn't happen. People work 2 jobs, 12 months a year. But nevertheless, the idea persists, and the publishing industry reflects that idea. They bring out so-called beach reads only in the summer. Matt Sheridan says, thoughts on Columbine by Dave Cullen. It's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. LD Jackson says, I hate to admit this, but over the last 59 years, my only real experience with Westerns has been limited to movies and TV. Any recommendation for 2 or 3 books that Western movies were based on? Okay, well, one of the greatest Western movies of all time is True Grit, and it's based on a novel by Charles Portis that's terrific. Absolutely terrific. So I could start with that. Absolutely, I could start with that. Or Mary Doria Russell wrote a book called Epitaph, which is about the gunfight at OK Corral. If you know Western movies and TV, then you've seen that story dramatized many, many times. Epitaph writes it in a novel, and it's really good. Uh, Isaiah Armstrong says maybe I should try James Joyce's Ulysses for Garb August. Exactly what I'm talking about. I say it's garbage, but it clearly isn't what the event is talking about. And the closer to, when we get closer to August, I will try to figure out what the event is talking about, since it's clearly not talking about that. Even I say that Joyce doesn't belong there, Stephen King doesn't belong there. I'll just figure out who does belong there. Grandma Joe says, Moving On by Larry McMurtry, maybe a Western. Yeah, but it's a contemporary one. So maybe the time frame goes out the window. Maybe the thing we're looking for is something other than that. But I wonder, the time frame used to be ironclad, a foundational descriptor of Westerns. If that goes out the window, what else does? Bookins and Books says, I think I will start June on the range with Lucky Luke. Is Lucky Luke published in the US? No. Mark at Book Time with Elvis is also reading Lucky Luke, I think. Jasper says, the Thackeray was wrong to say his novel didn't have a hero. William Dobbin, my favorite character, though, is Rawdon. Uh, Barcode says Pynchon was allegedly a big fan of Warlock. Yes, indeed. And when you read Warlock, you'll see why. If you haven't already, it's memorable. Let's put it that way. It is memorable. Not in any Pynchonian ways, but still memorable. Matt Sheridan says, I like Cullen's book on Columbine, but my major gripe is that he seems too sympathetic to Dylan Cable at times. You sink too far into the literature. I'm seeing sympathy all in every one of these mass shooting stories that are coming out in the last 2 weeks. I'm seeing some degree of sympathy for the perpetrators. It's mysterious to me too. But if you sink too far in the material, you run that risk of the Stockholm, a little bit of Stockholm syndrome will set in. Jordan Parsons, it really seemed to me that Son of the Morning Star qualifies as a Western. It's nonfiction, but reads better than most novels. I agree, it reads better than most novels. I feel so sorry for the people who hear me recommend that, might hear you recommend it, and think, well, but it's a history book about, it's military history, it's Western history, it's biography of Custer, and I'm not ready for that. I'm not up for that. I want something I can relax and enjoy. I feel so sorry for those people because they don't know what they're missing. They don't know how great it is. I don't know that it counts as a Western because I think one of the hallmarks of a taxonomy of Westerns would be that they're fiction. But I don't know for sure. I'll figure it out in the course of this month. Andrew Russell's, what is the theme of Garb August? Reading garbage. Yes, reading trash for August. Reading trash. We have prompts. There's vintage. There's WTF. There's all sorts of prompts. You go to Criminali's channel, you can see his announcement video or mine. I also make an announcement video for Garb August. There's still some time left, but you might want to start getting some garbage now since you haven't read if you don't have any of your own. But you don't have to follow the prompts. You just have to read garbage. But in order for you just having to read garbage, we probably have to figure out what garbage is. I would love to do that, but I'm concentrating on Westerns for June because it's clear I don't even know for sure what a Western is. Tony Miller says Finnegan's Wake is proper garbage, but not in the spirit of this event. The spirit of this event is stuff that anybody would recognize as garbage. It is not, in other words, I asked my co-hosts early on in our Voxer group, I said, what is the difference that we are positing between a book that's trash and a book that's bad? And we haven't come to any definitive answers, but they're all really busy people. Aside from me, they're all really busy people. Let's see here. Anne Novella says Lucky Luke is Belgian. Yes, and seems to be popular, far more popular in Europe than in America. Trish Bovell says my idea of Westerns includes a horse and a cowboy hat, but not always. I could come up with a dozen examples that don't include even one of those. Isaiah Armstrong says someone needs to create an event just for reading Dude Bro books. Is that true? I would almost sign on for that, and I'm clearly the one to make that event. I'd almost sign on to it, but the worry that I would have is that all the people who would hear about it and latch onto it wouldn't sense the irony. They would actually be there to celebrate Fight Club. Jasper says it is hard not to become sympathetic when only the shooters' lives are covered and never the victims. Yes, yes. Danielle says, would pioneer and prairie fiction like Laura Ingalls Wilder books be considered westerns? Exactly. Are they? They share a lot of qualities in common, and they most of them drastically predate the time when we'd be talking about. What about James Fenimore Cooper? Does he write westerns? We need to figure it out. We need to figure it out. Gail Doty says, I love Son of the Morning Star. It's not difficult at all if you're even a little bit interested in the subject. I agree completely. Connell never wrote a better book. RTL LTR says, thoughts on the Oxbow incident. I really like it. I don't know that I'm going to be reading it for June on the Range. I think I'm going to stick to other things. But I really like it. I was happy to see it included in that Library of America, that beautiful Library of America volume, their anthology of westerns. Nick Piccarilli says, would you recommend W.H. Brand's History of the American West? I would, but maybe not for June on the Range. You want to be reading fiction. Dime store westerns for June on the Range. Gail says, sorry, meant to say that Riders of the Purple Sage is my June western. You're just going to read one? Why not read 6 or 7? J. Scott Phillips, Dude Bro December. Nick Piccarilli says Dude Brovember. Dude Brovember is pretty good. That gets the bro sound in there. That's pretty good. But it's a terrible, almost dare I say, evil idea. It would be misused. And with great power comes great responsibility. Oh, now I'm thinking about Dude Brovember. Oh. I mustn't think about Dude Brovember. Nobody outside of this chat would get it. The event would be swamped with Dude Bros, and I can't save them all. Ain't finna read that says, I've got 2 Gunsmith novels, one for June on the Range, one for Garb August. Yeah, I thought about there's Gunsmith and what is it, Luke Logan or what? There was 2 just endless series that are still going on, and they must be written by AIs by now. They must be. Humans can't possibly be writing these things. But I thought really a lot about reading one of those new for June on the Range. But I've got a lot of other stuff that I kind of want to do. I'm not sure that would be worth it since they're garbage. They're not sincere. I don't believe the humans write them. Gagging for Lit says Twilight and 50 Shades of Grey would be great for August. Yes, but they've been analyzed and done so much that I think I certainly am looking for, I'm looking further afield. They're just easy multi-billion-dollar copies of garbage. They're easy, whereas, there's a lot of garbage out there that nobody knows about. Let's see here. No, you evil people. I am not going to do Dude Brovember. No, I'm not. It would attract the wrong people. It might even make this channel go to 50,000. I don't want that. The only times this channel's ever undergone any kind of weird Frankensteinish explosion in viewership was because I was taunting Dude Bro channels. I run the risk of that every time I do that. Let's see here. Books and bookmarks and bookshelves. I'm reading The Virginian for the first time. A Million Ways to Die in the West for comedic relief, and a host of smutty Western historical romances. Well, don't be stingy with the names of those smutty Western historical romances. Feel free to pop some in the chat. Steve needs recommendations. Jasper says, I'm planning on 3 Westerns for June. Warlock, Lonesome Dove, and Riders of the Purple Sage. Wow. 3 really good ones. I want to read a lot of Westerns that aren't those as well. These Louis L'Amour, a whole bunch of other things, Max Brand, a whole bunch of other figures that have come up that I want to get a feel for this. Andrew Russell says, Willa Catherine, My Antonia might be a pick for June on the Range for me. See what I mean? Scarcely a horse or cowboy hat in sight, but surely we could agree that My Antonia is a Western. I don't know. Tony Miller says, Dude Brovember is a brilliant idea. It is not. I'm squashing Dude Brovember. All the wrong people would join. Let's see here. RTL LTR says, are there any other mammoth Westerns like Lonesome Dove that are 800 plus pages? Almost all seem very short. The Lonesome Gods by Louis L'Amour, by far the longest thing he ever wrote. But also, if we're divorcing Westerns from their 19th century setting, Moving On by Larry McMurtry, the other great book that he wrote, is almost as long as Lonesome Dove. Might even be a little longer. Let's see here. Geo Craftsman says yes, but after that, you get to once you attract the dude bros, you get to lecture them. There might be a lot of them. It makes me nervous because I don't want my channel to be big. I'm the only person on BookTube on YouTube at all that doesn't want his channel to be big. I don't want to be any bigger than it already is. And the only times that it has exploded, where I would get every morning and there were 1,000 more people, was when I touched on dude bro stuff. So an event dedicated all throughout the month of November. Oh my God. You people give me enough crap every time I go to 12,000. Imagine if this channel shot up to 30,000. I'd never hit the end of it. That's a terrible idea. Andrew Russell says, is The Sun by Philip Meyer worth a look? It is very much worth a look. Is it a Western? Matt Sheridan, Steve, what do you think would have happened if Lincoln had lived? Totally different world. Totally different world. A perfect refutation of the idea that the great man theory of history is false. It's a total refutation. Everything would have been different. And maybe we would be living now in a very, very different world. The evils of Reconstruction would not have happened. And that they are attestable to a lot. A lot can be laid at their doorstep. Nick Biccarilli says, will there be any videos of favorite Western movies? Oh, you bet there will be. I intend to do at least one video on that and on TV shows, not just movies. I don't know. The one thing that I'm a little unsure of here is my other co-hosts. They're all busy. They all have obligations other than sitting on the fainting couch reading and writing all day long. I want to do a ton of stuff, and I'd like to do a lot of this stuff with them. Where we record a StreamYard chat or a Zoom chat about Western TV shows, about Western movies, about our own personal history with Westerns, or a taxonomy of what a Western actually is or isn't. I'd love to do that. I'll do a lot of those kinds of videos by myself, but I'd rather do it with company. Let's see here. Bookmarks and bookshelves. I've recently found a ton of obscure zebra imprint historical Westerns from the 80s and 90s with the Fabio covers written by one-and-done authors no one knows. One-and-done authors didn't have Fabio covers. Joanna Lindsay and crew didn't have Fabio covers. They weren't one-and-done. So I'd be curious. You mean Fabio style covers, right? Not himself. I remember a lot of those novels, but you don't mean it's not actually Fabio. It's Fabio style, right? Mary Tumulty says, already started Angles Repose for June on the range. There you go. Another one with no horses and no hats. J. Scott Phillips says, how about Dude February? At least it would have a short month. No. February, Dude Brovember is not going to happen. Jasper says, the question Lincoln made me think of Stephen King's stupid scenario of a horrible world if Kennedy lived. And the Stephen King novel that everybody told me, well, surely you're going to like this one. Isaiah Armstrong wants to know, what are the best non-cowboy Westerns? Well, there you go. Yeah, a whole bunch of questions like that. Technically, The Shootist would count. J.B. Brooks is not a cowboy when we meet him. I don't know cowboys in the story. Let's see here. Laverne Hodge says, I used to love watching Westerns on TV. Freeman, I know you are a fan of Percival Everett. He wrote a wonderful Western called God's Country. Beth Hendy says, Epitaph by Mary Doria Russell is on my list. You're going to love it. Absolutely going to love it. Not sure you'll love the other book of hers, Doc Holliday. I'm not sure you'll love that quite as much. I didn't, but Epitaph, you'll love it. Jordan says, death comes for the Archbishop. Oh, right, referring to Willa Cather. Matt Sheridan says, Stephen King had a laughably bad take on Kennedy if Kennedy had lived. Bookmarks and Bookshelf says, I used Fabio as a blanket term. Yes, right. The Pinot illustrated style, probably among apt description of zebras. Right. Pinot was prolific and, is wonderful. I wish there were a whole book of Pinot's art, of romance art. But a lot of those, I'm not sure. I think the thing that's throwing me is your description of one and done. The romance as a genre tends not to have those authors. I'd be willing to bet that most of the authors that you're referring to that way probably wrote dozens of novels. It's just no one knows them. They're long since gone. I would love to see those books, Bookmarks and Bookshelves. If it's not too much trouble, if you could take very detailed pictures of those books, the covers, the step backs, and send those pictures to Steve. That would be great. They will almost certainly spark a lot of wonderful memories. Gagging for Lit says February sounds awesome. Yeah, well, it's a dream. That's never going to happen. So there you go. Tony Miller says, "Does Back to the Future 3 count as a Western film? There are horses and hats." No, it does not. Matt Sheridan, do you like the Lassie show? No, I did not like the Lassie show. No, it was very, very disconcerting for me. And in the way that I could describe it to you, is a poorly dubbed foreign film where the dubbing is all in English, but the actors clearly are not talking in English. It starts to give you a pain right here if you watch too much of that. That's exactly what any kind of dog movies or TV shows did to me. Uh, let's see here. Uh, we're gonna have to wrap this up. Keep in mind, it's 7:57 at 8:05 or 6. We're gonna wrap this up. We were 60 of you. We've had a lot of fun. This was mainly it was supposed to be a Louis L'Amour thing. I guess I got that in. People who watch this video after the live is not live anymore will get that. Let's see here. Okay, bookmarks and bookshelves. You can send them through Instagram, right? Or you could email me. My email is on every video. Let's see here. Gagging for Lit says, "Will you slash have you?" You were already chastised for this, wasn't it? You earlier in this chat. You want to know? You are seriously asking me if I have read the latest Hanya Yanagihara. I read all day and all night. I have forever, and I am a professional book critic. What have I done to deserve these questions? Don't judge me by my lazy colleagues who read a little bit of what they have to read. I read everything. You seriously asking me if I have read the latest book by the author of A Little Life? We don't want to end on that note. We don't. Ain't finna read that. Says Malcolm Gladwell calls a Western a story where a single man brings law to a lawless place. Yeah, that's great. That would be great. And it would be far more interesting if Malcolm Gladwell didn't have his head rammed all the way up his asteroid belt. But he does, so we don't have to worry about what he thinks. Jordan says, Steve, which American writers do you think deserve a Library of America edition? Bruce Catton. And I've said that for a long time, and he's finally getting one. This year he's getting one. I'd also say Samuel Eliot Morrison deserves it. I don't know if he will ever get one or not, but I'm going to scream from the rooftops when Bruce Catton volume finally comes out. It's coming out this summer, I think. And it's long, long overdue. I'm hoping that it has the whole of his centennial history of the American Civil War. But if it doesn't, I'll take whatever it is. Maybe they can do more than one volume. Matt Sheridan says, so I'm guessing you don't like the Homeward Bund films? Homeward Bund. I don't know that. Is it German? Anyway, Jenny Park says it's only 1 a.m. in the UK. Keep going. No. 8:05 or 6. Let's see here. Isaiah Armstrong says, I'm currently reading Le Mort d'Arthur. Shouldn't that count as a Western since cowboys are basically the knights of the American West? No. No. Kindly leave the 21st century. Whatever I say is right. Otherwise, you're a bigot mentality at the door. Okay. Things are still things. And the things that are things are not other things. Just because the 21st century says that you are a bigot if you say that doesn't mean it's true. No. The Mort d'Arthur does not count. No, it does not. Geo Craftsman says, hello, Steve. Have you read Green Eggs and Ham? Yes, I know. Andrew Russell is amazed that people are still asking, have you read questions? And the have you read Thomas Harris was followed by the have you read Hanya Yanagihara. Just amazing to me. Just I must have offended in a previous life. I must have. Jasper says you could argue Princess of Mars is a Western. You could, but you'd be wrong. Kindly leave the 21st century mentality of his reality is whatever I say it is on Twitter. And if you don't agree, you're a bigot. Kindly leave that mentality at the door. Okay? That does not apply here. Let's Homeward Bound. Oh, right. Okay. Yeah, the Homeward Bound novel movies make no sense to me whatsoever. Barcode says, if knights are cowboys, so are pirates. So what's your favorite pirate novel? Tony Miller is responding to Jenny Parks. True, but we have a lot of flag waving, so to so tomorrow. I think that means to do tomorrow. So need to go to bed early. Right, I'm stepping into a conversation I don't understand. Uh, Gagging for Lit says the professor who was teaching me Derrida hissed at me over her desk. There are no such things as facts. Yeah, yeah, uh, there are. I would say that it's going to lead to the downfall of the country that so many people are being taught that there are no such things as facts. But the downfall of the country is going to happen anyway, real soon. So we don't have to. I don't have to worry about it. It's not going to matter. Uh, Jasper says the best pirate novel is obviously Treasure Island. Took the words right out of my mouth. LD Jackson says, has anyone done a PG Woodhouse read along? These days, we all need to spend some quality time in Plum's wonderfully wacky part of the world. But he would be canceled. Uh, there are details all throughout the Jeeves and Worcester novels just alone that would get him thoroughly canceled. The only reason they haven't got him canceled is because the people who would cancel him don't read. So they would need someone to find those details, and no one has done that yet. But as far as I know, there's never been a PG Woodhouse read along event. But he won't last long. The first Danger Haircut blue checkmark Twitter person who finds what's in some Jeeves and Worcester novels, where characters are black people are routinely called niggers. The books will be canceled and they'll never come back. They'll go out of print and they'll never come back. All it will take is for their major publisher to be picketed, for one publishing assistant on their way to the parking lot to be murdered, and the books will be gone completely. It doesn't matter that horrible word is never used derogatorily anywhere when P.G. Woodhouse uses it. He's using it only because it was used, but never in any kind of derogative sense. But it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter at all to the people that burn books these days. Let's see here. Ain't finna read that says Less Than Zero takes place in Los Angeles, which is technically a Western city. You're all starting trouble. I will figure out what Westerns are, but it's easy to know what they aren't. Jenny Parks, Queen's Jubilee gave me a whole day off, so I'm sleeping in. Yes, I've been told over and over again in these last few days via email that I really need to do a Windsor starter kit in honor of the Platinum Jubilee. And I checked and double checked because I was certain that I'd done it, and I haven't. So I will. I will do that. In fact, I'll probably work that up this weekend. J. Scott Phillips says The Princess of Mars does at least have a chapter early on set in the Old West, John Carter in that cave. Yeah. Right? So what? I've killed and eaten a buffalo on the American West. Doesn't make me a cowboy. Let's see here. Gagging for Lit says, would you consider any Jeanette Winterson books as garbage? I Love Oranges Are Not the Only Fruit, but Frankenstein was not good. Well, no. When you're talking about someone like her, or all the people who've been mentioned, you can't use the term garbage. It's not what Criminale has in mind. It's not what I automatically think of. It's probably not what you automatically think of. And it does a disservice. There's an element of fun in garbage. When a serious work of literature fails, there is a shorthand way to say, well, the ways that it failed make it garbage. But it isn't the kind of garbage that we're talking about for Garbodiers. Not at all. Not at all. And there's no fun in the failure. No, it would be something else. I just need to get the other Garbogus hosts to talk about this with me. That's all. But they're so busy. Wilson Shugart says 3 cheers to a Windsor starter kit. Yes, I thought you'd like that. Being an unacknowledged left of the sheet byblow of the Windsors yourself. I don't know if I'll be mentioning you in said starter kit, but I would have to go through it, right? We'd want overviews, and then we'd want the best books on the major Windsors. Not only when the name was officially changed, but the whole household. Essentially, I'd be doing a reading list of 10 years ago. I did a big thing called A Year with the Windsors. I'd essentially doing a reading list, tipping in on that. Let's see here. Gagging for Lit says red, white, and royal blue. Try that garbage. Gagging for Lit, please tell me that you are not, for the 3rd time in one chat, subtly asking me, have you read red, white, and royal blue? Please tell me you are not doing that. Please tell me you are not slyly wondering whether or not I have read that book by saying, try it. almost speechless. Uh, J. Scott Phillips says, "How about Star Trek? Oh God, the Star Trek original series novel Ishmael. Spock goes back in time to cross over with the old Here Comes the Bride's TV show. It wouldn't count as a western. No." uh, uh, RTL LTR says, "Hopefully, Paperback Junkie will take part in Garbage. We shall see. It'd be a natural fit, wouldn't it?" Yeah, ain't finna read that. Star Trek follows frontiersmen. No, no, no. Uh, uh, Martin S says, slightly off topic, but I'm about to read Samuel Richardson's Clarissa. Do you enjoy it? Uh, Slightly off topic. That's about as off topic as you get. And I'm amazed, considering this live stream, that you didn't ask me if I've read Samuel Richardson's Clarissa. I'm amazed that you didn't phrase it that way, considering what this live stream has been like. uh, Danielle says, Emma at A Bookish Princess has done PG Woodhouse read-alongs before. Oh, I didn't know that. I'll have to go and check them out. The Book of Mormon is set in the Western Hemisphere, so it is a Western. Star Trek is a Western in space, as is most science fiction. No, no. Once again, the 21st century worldview that if you can say something online, it must be true. And if anyone says it's not true and can prove it, they are a bigot and a Nazi and a transphobe and whatnot. That mind frame stops at the door of my live streams. The fact that you can put words together and confidently say them does not make them true. You can still be wrong. And in this case, you very much are. Andrew Russell says, I would consider some Ian Rankin that I have on my shelf to qualify as garbage. No, no. Oh God, we really need, my co-host and I really need to settle down on what this is. It is such a fun conversation to have, but there is no way you can say that Ian Rankin is unsuccessful, or that he isn't your cup of tea, or that he's exploitative, or that he's sometimes lazy. But garbage, you can't call his books garbage. I'm no great fan of his, but you can't call them garbage. They don't in any way qualify. But it's hard for me to say why they don't until we have determined, at least a little, Raymond Chandler style, what it is that we're talking about. Uh, Gagging Forelet says, I'm proud to have left you speechless. Well, you took 3 tries to do it, but it worked. Yeah. OMG. Am I making claims anywhere else? Serious claims anywhere else? Am I claiming to be a great Formula 4 race car driver? No. Am I claiming to be a great skateboarder? No. Do I claim great woodworking skills? No, I do not. Do I claim great culinary skills? No, I do not. Am I claiming great skills in pretty much any areas except dogs and books? No, I'm not. But when it comes to books, my Deb can tell, just ask her if you don't believe me. When it comes to books, it is far more expeditious and less insulting to me to simply ask me what I think about something than to ask me whether or not I've read the latest book by Hanya Yanagihara. No, I'll put it on my TBR right away. Good Lord. Good Lord. Whether or not I've read Thomas Harris, the author of the book that swept the Oscars. See, my artificial rhesus monkey transplant heart is throbbing to beat the band. J. Scott Phillips says, Tom Sawyer, Huckleberry Finn, Westerns? Nope. Jenny Park says, I'll just binge movie/TV novelizations and tie-ins for August. Yeah, well, according to the provisional list that Ollie made, those often are a dead giveaway that a thing is garbage, which ties into other qualifications that he was listing for garbage, which is if you have a movie tie-in, let's say, or TV show tie-in, and you hand it to somebody, well, the fact that it's a TV show tie-in is qualification number one, that it's garbage. But also, if you hand it to somebody, they have zero creative control. They can't do anything with the characters. So that's another qualification. And also, they probably have a monster deadline. They probably have to write 7,000 or 8,000 words a day. That's another qualification that was written at white hot speed with no reflection. They encourage that kind of categorization, but do they all? Do they all? Almost every item on Ollie's list, I was thinking of items that aren't garbage that do qualify. So we're going to have to talk about it, but not tonight because it's 8:11. So we'll go to 8:15 on the dot, and then we'll be done. So before we get to 8:15, I want to thank you all for showing up here, because I'm going to just cut you off. I'm going to hook you stage left at 8:15. But first, I want to thank you all for coming here. I started off talking about this thing, Crossfire Trail by Louis L'Amour. For those of you who are watching this as a video, I wanted to sort of clock in with my first Louis L'Amour June on the Range book. But as usual, the conversation went on to a whole bunch of other interesting places. I want to thank you all for that. I love that I can count on this. Let's see here. Jordan Parsons says, "Our Regency romance is garbage. I'm tempted to try one, but since I don't like Jane Austen, I don't think they're for me." Oh, that's right. You don't like Jane Austen. Ooh. Talk about leaving me speechless. Yes, Liz Schubert says, "Oh, Jordan, exactly. That stance is incomprehensible. Simply incomprehensible. It is so far beyond the barbed wire of we're all entitled to our opinions. You are simply wrong. You are simply not seeing what's there in front of you. Oh, plenty of other authors, plenty of them. I would say, how fascinating. Tell me all about it. But it, it is just baffling, absolutely baffling, more baffling than gagging for lit asking me if I've ever read Thomas Harris's novels. That it is totally baffling. Uh, Greg mentions William Cotswinkle's E.T. novelization. Exactly, exactly. So there'll be exceptions to any rule, but exactly. What are the exceptions to every category in Ollie's list? Go back to his video where he gives that list. I haven't done a response video of that list item by item yet myself, but I want to. I don't want to flood the airwaves with Garb August videos 2 full months before August when we've got June to talk about. Andrew Russell says, "I only meant garbage for the Ian Rankin in the sense that they are easy reads, something I might pick up to cleanse palate, but right enough, probably not enough to qualify as garbage." Not enough to qualify as garbage, and also not always easy reads, right? Easy in the prose, but pretty tough subjects sometimes. Gagging for Lit is back. Oh my God, what's it going to be this time? There's this author called Anthony Trollope. I dread looking. Table for One by Joseph Suglia. That truly is garbage. Do you count self-published novels by literature professors as suitable enough to read through? Well, I read a lot of self-published stuff, and we haven't even touched on self-published stuff, I think, in Garb August. I don't think that was even on the list. And God, that is an open door to so much garbage. We're going to have a lot to talk about in August. It's going to be a hit. I like the fact that June on the Range is resonating with so many people. Like I said, like I mentioned in an earlier video, it's always wonderful when the first event that someone comes up with is a hit. Because a lot of them flop, right? A lot of them no one's interested in. But June on the Range is a hit. And Garb August is already a hit. People can't wait to dig into both. Okay. Jenny Park says, "I've never read a Jane Austen to this day. Sorry." Barcode says, "The Book of the New Sun by Gene Wolfe is a Western." Okay, right. I've got a bar of Dove soap in the bathroom, and it is also a Western. Tony Miller says, Are there other authors famous for writing in one genre who dabbled in Westerns? Were they any good? Plenty dabbled in Westerns. Not always sure how good they are. I'm not always sure. That's actually a thing to study on its own. What happens when an author famous in one genre dabbles in Westerns? Do they often succeed? Mary Doria Russell is a perfect example. She started out writing science fiction. But I wonder, that's a good thing to think about. Oh, Jordan answers Jenny Parks by saying that Jane Austen is pure fluff. I honestly don't know what to say. I honestly don't. That is orders of magnitude beyond, oh boy, you don't know what you're missing, or oh, how dare you, or oh my God, you're so wrong. I I literally leaves me speechless. It is. I very seldom say this. Very seldom do I say that somebody's reaction to a book is right or wrong. I instead want to know what their reaction is and why it is. But that kind of a summary verdict on Jane Austen is simply wrong. I know that rails against it. It rubs against the attitude that there's no wrong way to read, and we all have our different tastes. But I don't even know. I don't even know. Okay, Freeman says Elmore Leonard succeeded, right? And he's not the only one. Lauren Esselman did. A whole bunch of other people have. In terms of crossing over into Westerns and writing them really well, as opposed to crossing over Westerns and thinking you can slum and get away with anything because it's a ghetto. Plenty of authors come into Westerns and take it seriously and write really good stuff. That's a list on its own for just so many videos to do for June on the Range. So many of them. I don't know where I would start. I'm going to keep going with Louis L'Amour, but there's a lot of other stuff that I want to read. And also, there was a big anthology. I wish I still had it. There's a big anthology of Westerns. There's been a lot of Western anthologies. There was one, had a sort of a gold lettering on the cover. It was from about probably 30 years ago. I almost want to say that it was a Library of America or Modern Library, a big thing with a gold letters superimposed over the painting on the cover. I think the cover painting was a canyon. I don't think the cover had humans on it. I remember loving that anthology, and I cannot find it anywhere. Mainly because I can't remember what it was. Yes, it's almost 8:15. In fact, it is. It's 8:17. So we're going to have to wrap this up. We're going to have to wrap this up for the evening. Jordan Parsons says that Jane Austen is fluffy. And Leo Picara says, but it's genius fluff. You're both wrong. What a weird way to end. What a weird note to end on. It's just it is as incomprehensible as saying that War and Peace is dumb. War and Peace is not for me. I had problems with the last part of War and Peace. War and Peace is not my favorite as opposed to Anna Karenina. That sort of thing, sure. Someone says War and Peace is dumb. You aren't even outraged. You just anyway. Okay. Barco says I learned a lot about Westerns, and I don't know if that's ironic. I don't know if that's sarcastic or not. I meant to spend this whole time talking about Westerns, but we ended up talking about garbage more than Westerns. But there will be other Steve streams, right? There will be other Steve streams. But this one has to come to an end. I said 8:15. We'll do 8:20. But I want to thank you. I want to thank you all. These are all so much fun. It is. I've been emailing a whole bunch of people about this, saying it is just so incredible, such amazing fun that without any warning at all, I can start a live stream and have a ball. Just have a ball talking with people. That is just amazing to me. I would never 10 years ago, and I never in a million years would I have thought. I'm very, very grateful is what I'm saying. The maddening parts notwithstanding, I thought that Gagging for Lit was going to have the prize for maddening parts in this live stream by continuing to ask if I have ever read authors that are my bread and butter. But it turns out Jordan Parsons takes the prize this time around. We're going to have to name that prize at some point or other. But anyway, it's 8:20. I'm going to wrap this up and tend to my little bean. Which, for those of you who are coming to this video without knowing my channel, means my little miniature schnauzer. Okay? Get your mind out of the gutter. But anyway, there'll be plenty of videos tomorrow, and one of the normal videos tomorrow, not a live stream, will be about Westerns. So I'm gonna wrap this up for now. Thank you all so much. Good God, this is so much fun. We could do this every night. Anyway, I'm gonna go for now, but I'll be back. Thank you very much.